start it now. There we go. So good morning and a very, very, very warm welcome to those of you who are new today and those of you who are returning from yesterday. It is a great pleasure to be part of World Interfaith Harmony Week. It's a different kind of thing than my everyday life, not in terms of what we'll be doing together, but just in terms of this context of interfaith harmony. I am involved in some interfaith movements in various ways, but it's just, this feels like a celebratory and wonderful way to gather. So I'm really glad you all joined. I'm Jennifer Wilhoit of TEALarbor Stories, and I did put the link in the chat box. And I just learned moments ago that if you just joined and you don't see it there, let me know and I can repost the things that were there. I am an author, I'm a spiritual ecologist, and I guide, and I'm a creative, and I guide people through creative and healing processes. And so I would love to offer you all today some of those things. Today's focus is one of my favorite topics, is on gratitude. So what I would like to do is start by lighting this candle, which I have, just to help us create a sacred space. And if you have a candle or something beautiful near you, you can acknowledge its presence or light the candle, or just know that this candle is helping us hold the space. And hopefully I won't burn anything down. I have a rock cairn to keep us grounded in the earth. And I have some chimes that I will use to bring us out of some writing activities, and hopefully it won't sound too loud. I'll try and do it really gently. Sometimes it is really resounding on Zoom. Let's start with a poem by the poet Rumi, a 13th century, try and say that 3 times fast, Persian poet. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each one has been sent as a guide from beyond. So I would like to continue in a quiet way, offering a few minutes long, at most, guided meditation, just to help us settle a little bit, deepen, to get a little bit focused on gratitude. So if you're comfortable, you can close your eyes or look away from the screen, turn your video off if that helps you feel more comfortable. We're going to start with a small meditation by taking a long, slow, deep breath in and slowly exhale. In your own pace, breathe in and breathe out, allowing any tension, any preoccupations, any worries to just melt away with each exhalation. Feel yourself deepening, relaxing, becoming more still. Now bring your awareness to the top of your head and picture a warm, loving light spreading from the top of your head all the way down to your toes. Maybe make that warm, loving light your favorite color. And feel your muscles relax as that light washes over you, surrounding you, protecting you. Breathe again in and out. In this safe, very safe and relaxed state, begin to reflect on things for which you are grateful. You might start with the breath that is moving in and out of your lungs freely, the comfort of the place you are sitting, that you are safe right now where you are. Consider saying thank you to each one of those things that's coming to mind. Where do you feel the gratitude in your body? See if you can feel it someplace. No judgments, just allow it. Again, turn to your breath, breathing in, breathing out. Feeling the expansiveness that comes. Quietly to yourself, if you're comfortable, thank those blessings. Thank the universe for being there and holding you. And may your gratitude multiply. When you feel comfortable, slowly return to this space, to this mini community for the hour. Welcome back. Breathing feels good. Before we start talking about gratitude, and even more to the point, doing something to recognize and honor and acknowledge the gratitude that we have, I'm wondering if any of you want to share where you're dialing in from. I know yesterday we had a very international group, and another thing I love about World Interfaith Harmony Week is the word world, and the fact that we have sometimes an international community of folks. So if you're comfortable, just unmute yourself, or if you're not muted, just chime in and let us know where you're dialing in from. Oh, and I'm dialing in from, I'll start, from a little island in the Puget Sound of Western Washington on the west coast of the United States. And this is the traditional land of the Suquamish Native people.
I'm in Seattle, so Seattle, Washington. Yeah.
Excellent. So we're neighbors then.
Yeah, and we're also somewhat neighbors. I'm living on the territories of the Clallam people, and that's Port Angeles, Washington, also Western United States.
Excellent. Both of you are my neighbors within an hour. Wonderful welcome. Thank you.
Well, I'm in the middle of the state. I'm in southern Illinois, although I started out Puget Sound, I remember years ago, taking that drive down to get to the ferry. I got my first speeding ticket there.
Oh dear. Hopefully we're all moving slower than we once did in our lives, right?
I'm from Michigan, a suburb of Detroit.
Wonderful. Thank you and welcome, Samina. I'm glad you made it today.
Me too.
I mean, you made it yesterday too, but.
I'm in Montana, Bozeman, Montana, specifically.
Bozeman?
Bozeman.
Been through Bozeman, had a lot of coffee in Bozeman on long road trips.
A lot of
welcome.
coffee shops in Bozeman.
A lot of coffee shops, good coffee too. Thanks, Scott.
And I'm dialing in from Germany again, but today not from Stuttgart as yesterday. Today I'm in the Bodensee area, which is the biggest in Germany. So I'm traveling for business and hi again.
Wonderful. Hi again, Andreas. And that's such a surprise. I just imagined you were still in Stuttgart. So I'm glad you're able to tune in even while you're on the road. Thank you. That's great.
Hi, I'm Juanita Hockley, and I am dialing in from Parker, Colorado. I'm sorry I'm not able to be on the video today, hopefully tomorrow.
Oh, good. Juanita, I'm so glad you're here and Colorado. So we've got a number of states and countries going on here. That's great. Yes. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm in Southern California. Don't hate me for my sunshine.
Yeah, a little jealous. It's raining here quite a lot, actually. Okay, so let's talk about gratitude a little bit before I get you started on an activity. So the first thing and the last thing and the forever thing to me about gratitude, and I do write a lot about it, and in fact I'll put a couple of links in the chat in a few minutes when you're working on your activity, of some things I've written about gratitude, things I've written recently. And there are a whole lot more if you go to my website, which is also in the chat, or at least for some of you, it's in the chat. I have some things that you can access for free online, articles I've written. But the first, the last, and the forever thing about gratitude is that it is not conditional. Isn't that awesome? No matter what the circumstances of our lives are in a moment, we can, if we're persistent enough, perhaps even in a dark, dark moment, find something for which we can be grateful. And I think probably we've all had more practice than we've wanted with that gratitude seeking and finding over the last year of great hardship and difficulty for so many. I, for one, am feeling exceedingly safe and privileged where I am, and somewhat protected, although not really, from, for example, COVID, because I know lots of people who have had it and some who have succumbed to the disease. And so just breathing this year has felt really good, and something for which I am grateful. So So how can we find gratitude even through hard times? And I think for me, it comes through really focusing on the moment, on right now. And I will share with you a very personal story. I can't believe I'm about to have this recorded online because I haven't even written publicly about it yet. But I went through a really hard spell some years ago, about 15 years ago. And it lasted for several years. And it was really painful, like those times in our life when we're going through transition or some other kind of thing. And I didn't have any real anchors in my life. I had just moved back across the country, back to this area, but to a different island than where I'm living now. And it was difficult. There were a lot of difficult circumstances. The details don't matter, but the difficulty was pervasive. And I felt perpetually unsafe. I didn't really have gratitude practices back then that I was doing on any kind of regular basis, but I needed to feel safe. I longed to feel safe. And the only way I knew how to do that was this. I happened to find a trail. The trail was on this island, which is kind of weird. It was a park trail with some Puget Sound saltwater on one side and some beautiful forest on the other side. And I didn't even live here on this island at the time. I lived 2 hours away and a ferry boat ride away from where I'm sitting right now. But I would come to this island to visit. I had friends here. And I would walk this one trail, and I knew as soon as I stepped on that trail, I would say to myself, "You're okay. You're safe right now. You're totally safe." And it was kind of felt contrived. It felt a little bit fake because I really didn't internally feel safe. I didn't feel stable. I didn't feel held. I didn't feel much of anything constant or securing. But the more I said it and the more I moved my feet along that pathway, the deeper I would move into a feeling of safety. And so I clocked many, many miles. It was before the days that I think most of us were counting steps. But if I'd had one of those, little step machines or whatever they are, I would have seen thousands and thousands and probably tens of thousands of steps. I just would move along and pay attention to the trees and the breeze and the lighting. And that plus meditation, which for me was simply getting very still and very quiet and focusing on my breath. Those two things, I'm convinced, saved my life in those moments. And over time, I started through hard work, like we all do in a life transition, started gathering back those bits of safety, the kind of material things and emotional things that we do to feel secure. But my spiritual anchor was that presence in the moment and moving along that foresty, watery pathway. I tell that story because to me it's proof, I think, that it isn't the circumstances of our lives that create the gratitude. It's our perspective and it's our embrace of a desire to look at the awe and the beauty and the things that do work in a moment in our lives. You all are part of this community we're creating for this hour, and I'm convinced that you all have pieces of wisdom about gratitude and all kinds of things that would be helpful to this group. So if at any moment you want to share something or ask a question or jump in, please feel free. This is a conversation for all of us.
I actually have a question.
Yes, Faith.
Because gratitude, I know, is really important for contentment and spiritual growth, and I find it hard sometimes. Like my grandpa passed away a couple weeks ago, and he was like my dad. So like in times like this, I'm like, oh, I should like think about what I'm grateful for. And like, I like avoid it. And I'm curious, the best way to like get around or through that, like when you don't feel grateful and you want to because you know it'll help, like that's what I struggle with.
I hear you, and grief is huge. And thank you for your vulnerability. And I'm so sorry you lost your grandpa, your dad-like human. That's a big, big deal and a big loss. And it's really hard.
Yeah.
And the very first thing I would say is you're doing exactly what you need to do right now, which is feeling that. Because we don't just make up gratitude. It doesn't just, we don't contrive it. It's not a contrived thing. It's a lived and a felt thing. And so when we're in the throes of deep grief, which I have experienced many times, including in the story I just told, I didn't know it was grief then. I didn't call it grief. I didn't even cry that much, but boy, was I grieving. I learned later, who knew? But to feel those feelings are really important. And so I would say you don't have to expect gratitude to come or to force it to be there. If, though, in the midst of your tears and your grief and the pain and that ache that grief can sometimes feel like in our bodies, if you can turn to the things that feel good, that feel soothing, that are beautiful to you, it might be a painting or a tree or a quality of the air and the breath outside on your face, those things can offer us the balm, B-A-L-M, the soothingness that later can look like gratitude. So gratitude isn't just, I feel great. And I so appreciate X, Y, and Z, because sometimes it doesn't feel like that. Sometimes it feels like just getting quiet and still and accepting what is, which is that right now is really a hard time. I don't know if that's helpful.
It is. Thank you. Yeah.
And I know there are other grief experts in this group. I'm looking at one of you, but you can't tell who I'm looking at. So if anybody else has something to offer, feel free.
Well, I don't know if I can say this. I lost my daughter 5 years ago, one of my daughters, and I was far, far from feeling gratitude about that. And I still really haven't reached the point of she died unexpectedly. So I'm very sorry for Grandpa, that you lost a loved one. I just had a lot of people just reassure me that I needed to feel my feelings and be in a safe place where I could express those, talk about my loss, talk about my sweet daughter, and gradually through the process, the gratitude. I never thought I'd feel joy again, truthfully. But one day I was like, oh, I noticed a strange, or not a strange, but a feeling of joy that I hadn't felt for a year or 2 or 3. And it just, focusing on the now, doing what you can. I liked what you said, Dr. Jennifer, about finding the things that were, that help calm us, and certainly the people, that can just be with us and not tell us to move on, because you will.
Right.
You are where you need to be.
Exactly.
Or where you are, maybe not where you need to be, but you are where you are, I guess. Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Suzanne.
you, Susan. And also my condolences to you. I cannot imagine that loss and what you bore as you felt that grief. Isn't it interesting that we started out talking about gratitude and grief is just on the other side of that, isn't it? I mean, they're I don't know if I want to say they're the same thing or two sides of a coin or something cliche like that, right? But gratitude is there, it's available to us if we want it, but there's also all of this other stuff going on, and they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, I did lose my mom a couple of years ago. It was a very, very painful time, like those losses are. And because I've practiced gratitude ad nauseum for years now, more than a decade for sure, very actively and consciously, I was able in small moments during that hard time to be grateful for the little sufferings that she did not have to endure, for the way I and we had worked on our relationship some before she passed away. So frankly, I was not left with so much of the ick of the unresolved things in our relationship, the moment of being able to be with her when she passed away. So gratitude, yeah, it doesn't always feel good in that way we think of, like joy or excitement about something we're looking forward to, but it can be there for us in these other forms. So let's move into an activity to get you going. And what I'm going to do is to give this to you kind of step by step over the next 10 or so minutes. So I encourage you to get your paper ready. And like I mentioned yesterday, I prefer you write on your page landscape orientation. And if you have lines on your paper, you can ignore them. And if that's just too weird, just write however you need to on the page. But this landscape way can free us a little bit. So the very first thing I would ask you to do, and no one's going to see this, no one's going to ask you to read what you wrote. So try and claim this for yourself, make it work for you, this activity. And the very first thing I would like for you to do is to think about all of the non-human beings around you. Who and what are those non-human beings? And just begin to list those on your page. And Faith, you can begin with your cat. Just take a minute and list them. Begin inside your home, and then please extend to what is outside your home, to the natural world. If you know there's a particular tree, but you don't know how to identify it as a species, call it something. Name it in some way. And if you do know what the species are, please include those. Now that you have a growing list, I want you to think about an attribute or two or three for each of those items on your list. Oh, and the other thing I'll just say, because I'm looking at Andreas and remembering yesterday, if English is not your first language, feel free to write in your first language if that's more comfortable. There's no need, because I am limited in my language skills, and so I'm speaking English right now, which is my first language. Write in whatever language works for you. So think about the attributes, the positive characteristics of each of those non-human beings you've mentioned, and just list a couple of attributes, positive characteristics for each one of those beings. So now you have maybe a list of some non-human beings, and for each one of them, you have some positive characteristics. So now I would like you to look at those various attributes or positive characteristics and see if you yourself have any of those same attributes or characteristics. Are you like any of those things? And mark that however you want on the page. You might even do a little free write journaling about that if you're noticing something. Consider also what you receive from any or all of these non-human beings around you. What do you receive? Do you receive any gifts, any sense of beauty? Do you receive the breath of life as you stand near a tree or a plant? Do you receive affection if it's a pet? What might you receive from some or all of these beings? Now I want you to shift your focus a little bit to your relationship to this being. And I don't mean this is my pet or that's the tree outside my window, but how much attention or presence do you give to any of these non-human beings around you? I'll give a quick example. A friend of mine, a colleague of mine, the other day said, oh, actually, it was one of you yesterday, I think, talking about 3 cedar trees and lying down. No, it wasn't here. It was Sunday, sorry. It was in a reading group, a new reading group I'm in. And Sunday, one of the people said they have 3 red cedar trees in their yard that are close enough together. This is on the Olympic Peninsula somewhere, I gather. Close enough together that her head could touch one, her backside could be up against another, and her feet could stretch out and touch the third. And that when she really needed a good dose of something, she would go and touch all 3 of these trees at once. And I imagine this person, who was not a young person, just splayed out in her front yard, attached in various ways to these trees. So think about, what do you give any of these beings in terms of attention, presence, care, love, appreciation? How do you show appreciation for these non-human beings? Take another 30 seconds or so and write down whatever must be written that you have not yet written down. Slowly come back from your writing. And I'm going to stop the video recording now.